We are Rogue Media Sports.
There are any number of reasons you might consider selling your home. To move closer to family, live within a smaller budget, or just wanting a change of scenery. Whatever your reasons, having to figure out all the various housing market trends in your area may not be what you signed up for. That's where an agent who is a realtor comes in. Realtors have the expertise to help you find the right price and navigate the process to sell your home in a way that's right for you. That's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
The living room is where you make life's most beautiful memories. But your sofa shouldn't be the one remembering them. The new life-resistant, high-performance furniture collection from Ashley is designed to withstand all the spills, slip-ups, and muddy paws that come with the best parts of life. Ashley high-performance sofas and recliners are soft, on-trend, and easy to clean. Shop the high-performance furniture in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.
It is another episode of the Doomsday podcast. Ed Werder, alongside I'm Matt Mosley, and got a big name guest as always. Daniel Wallach, the official lawyer, official attorney of Doomsday, is going to be with us to explain the latest as we tape this, getting ready for a preliminary injunction hearing in the Southern District of New York. And so we'll, in the next 24 hours, we'll probably have some resolution on if Zeke Elliott will be able to play out this season. Daniel Wallach, kind enough to join us later. Ed, as we prepare for yet another Doomsday podcast, I think it is amazing how quickly a team's fortunes can change. And after that Packers loss, you just sort of wondered, okay, can the Cowboys get back on the right path? And I would say 2 games into this thing, this is a team that feels completely different about itself. And if they get the ruling like they need with Zeke Elliott, this has to be a team to be reckoned with in the NFC.
Well, I think they're fortunate in the schedule while putting them on the road consecutive weeks following that Packers loss at home, pitted them against one team that was hopelessly overmatched in the winless San Francisco 49ers, a game the Cowboys completely dominated. And then they had the good fortune of being on the road in a division game against the Washington Redskins, who were coming off a Monday night game that they lost against the Eagles, so they were playing on a short week. Let's be honest, this was an injury devastated football team that the Cowboys played yesterday. The Redskins started the game without 3 offensive line starters. People forget that their number 1 pick, Jonathan Allen, the defensive lineman, so disruptive on the interior, has been out now for a couple of weeks and will miss much of the season. They played without the starting cornerback in Brashad Breeland. So even though they got Josh Norman back, this was a team that the Cowboys should have handled. And for quite a while in the first half, I thought we were going to be talking about an unconscionable Cowboys loss.
Yeah.
But I think, they did prevail in all 3 phases of the game, the most important being that they were able to dominate yet another opponent with their run game, which really seems to be in sync right now.
All right, we're all going to get all into this as we go. Ed Werder will continue to discount any happiness any Cowboys fans might have had after that win yesterday. Let's get going. Please play the music,
tell the truth
Frito.
here. This is the truth.
Tell the truth. All right, let's go. And it is time for some Doomsday podcast action. And Ed, as we look back at this one, so many interesting moments, but none bigger than what ended up being an enormous swing in the game. And I always mention this to you, Ed, that I feel like when you look back on a season, sometimes there are some so-called iconic moments. We might look back at this moment if the Cowboys are able to do something, if they are able to keep Zeke Elliott, which we will talk about later with one of our legal experts returning to the Doomsday podcast. But a blocked field goal in this game with the Redskins in a position to go up 16-7. With both teams had backup kickers because of injuries, with an opportunity there to with 36. I mean, that's Ed, for all intents and purposes, that's an extra point. And even on a rough day with some tough weather, you got to make a 36-yard field goal. And if the Cowboys fall down, or if they're down 16-7, that to me just has a completely different feeling. And there comes Crawford's big old paw to knock that ball down. If he didn't get it, I believe David Irving would have, and it changed the complete complexion of the first half in that entire ball game.
Well, I think we knew, and I know the Cowboys talked a lot about, as they prepared for the game in Washington, that the weather forecast suggested a potential wet field, rain throughout the game, all of which materialized, and they felt that that was going to play to their advantage because they were going to feature Zeke Elliott and the run game, and that's what you do in those kind of conditions. But we didn't know that not only would that be a factor in that particular phase of the game, but that the Redskins would struggle most of the day with their holder taking the snap. I mean, he's almost like Tony Romo times 8 in Seattle, right? He bobbled and mishandled almost every snap on those placements. And in this particular situation, I think it was the turning point in the game when Tyrone Crawford, blocked the kick after there was, again, a problem handling the snap and putting it down. Then, obviously, Orlando Scandrick picked it up and ran 86 yards. That began a period of time in which the Cowboys outscored the Redskins 19-0. So not only was it a 10-point swing right there, but it seemed to affect the momentum of the game and shifted it heavily the Cowboys' way. And the Redskins, for the most part, were only faintly competitive thereafter. So it was like I said, they dominated in the run game on offense. On defense, they had 4 sacks and 3 takeaways against an injured Redskins offensive group. And then special teams, again, contributed with this block kick.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it went. I was a little surprised, by the way, Ed, that early in that game, the Redskins were having a little bit of success moving the ball. Chris Thompson is a great weapon for them, and obviously they didn't do much in the way of the running game, but that's a smaller back who seems to give teams all sorts of trouble in space, and I was a little surprised, and I understand what he was trying to do, but, going with Kelly and trying to create some sort of running game when you are 3 starters down. 2 of those guys are Pro Bowl caliber players. Trent Williams, one of those, Sheriff, the other one who's been to a Pro Bowl.
Left tackle, right guard.
Yeah, those are big-time players for them that were out. And the Redskins did, and Redskins are in a. You'd like to think some of this might have been the Cowboys secondary, but the Redskins have a big problem. They don't have wideouts who make plays. And, later in the ball game, Josh Doxson had a chance to make a play for his quarterback. He did not do it. He dropped a ball on a downfield throw from Kirk Cousins. Right now, Cousins, who year after year is, I don't know if the Redskins will ever give him a long-term deal, even though he puts up incredible numbers. But he doesn't have wideouts right now who are making plays for him at all. Terrell Pryor was barely playing in the previous weeks. He was not a big part of the game plan yesterday. I look out there and wonder, who is he supposed to go to? I mean, we thought this team might have some weapons other than Jamison Crowder, who is very hard to cover. There's no, wideouts. I mean, Doxson was great at TCU. He's doing nothing for them. Terrell Pryor's doing nothing for them. That's a team that I don't even quite honestly know how they've put up the numbers that they have. It's probably because of those tight ends and Thompson.
Right. It's a unique situation because the Redskins obviously – in their scouting department failed in their evaluation, or so it's suggested, with their putting a first-round pick on Doxson, and then they went out and signed Pryor to replace Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon, who were both allowed to leave in the offseason. So the Cousins is now reduced to relying on his running back and his 2 tight ends, and then they lost one of the tight ends. Jordan Reed went out in the middle of the game too. So this was a situation where the Cowboys' corners and secondary, for the most part, weren't going to be tested, with the exception of whoever the safety was going to be involved in covering the tight ends, which turned out to be Byron Jones. But they were going to test the linebackers and the safeties in this game. They weren't going to get the perimeter players all that involved, and obviously that played to the Cowboys' advantage with their linebacker core back at full strength.
One thing I would try to do right now as we continue to talk about this Cowboys defense, I go back and forth on these things. Do you when a guy's having a career year, but he's had some back injuries, do you take the Cowboys have been known, Ed, you've seen this happen over the years, to reward a guy or get a deal done during the season. It does happen from time to time. If there was any way in the world you could get some sort of team-friendly type deal with DeMarcus Lawrence based on that he wants to be here, I would think about doing something like that. But otherwise, you just keep watching this play out. And Ed, the combination of David Irving and DeMarcus Lawrence, I mean, you talk about how much difference a couple of weeks can be. With the return of David Irving over the past 3 games since he's returned from that 4-game suspension to start the season, I believe that this has become one of the best pass rushing duos in the NFL, and I think the numbers would bear that out. And I think about Bosa, whoever basically you put up beside Bosa right now.
Melvin Ingram.
Melvin Ingram obviously is a great player, but this is one of the most potent pass rushes, and we wondered, is this Cowboys defense going to do anything outside of DeMarcus Lawrence? I can't recall. When we waited for a few years ago for Greg Hardy to come back and wondered, okay, what's his impact going to be? And it really never ended up being that great of an impact. David Irving's impact, these are both players right now that are on pace to end up in the Pro Bowl.
Okay, well, let's keep in mind, first I'm going to say this. We recognized early on when Lawrence was accumulating sacks from the beginning of the season, and he's had one now in 7 consecutive games and has 10 for the year, that they had the good fortune of playing some bad offensive lines, right? And that was kind of the case yesterday. I mean, they played 2 rookies making their first NFL starts and playing without their left tackle, without their right guard, and without their center. That's the equivalent of somebody playing the Cowboys, without Tyron Smith, without Travis Frederick, and without Zach Martin. So it's kind of hard to give full credit to any defensive player as a pass rusher who makes a lot of plays against in that scenario. That being said, yeah, these guys have been tremendously productive. What do they have? 10 sacks or 15 sacks between the 2 of them. And that, to me, was the biggest question about this team coming in. That and the fact that they flipped the whole secondary over, with the exception of Byron Jones. And could that particular part of the team grow and evolve and develop over the course of the season to be something legitimate by the end of the year? But yeah, the pass rush has been way better than I thought. How much of that is a function of the schedule falling as it did, where they got to play, the Giants and the Broncos, who don't have great offensive line. And this week they're going to play the Chiefs, and they don't have a great offensive line either. That's why they run a college offense, is because their offensive line isn't very good. But I don't mean to diminish what these 2 players have achieved. But the reality is they've been fortunate in the way things have fallen, and it certainly was to their advantage with the injury situation that the Redskins brought to the field against them in the most recent game. And as for Lawrence's future, I mean, I saw what Stephen Jones said last week, and he described how the team approaches the use of the franchise player tag, which they used twice on Anthony Spencer. And I thought the description he gave was identical description of DeMarcus Lawrence. You're trying to keep a guy who's a young player, who's had some great statistics, who indicates he could be a franchise-type player, but has had some injury issues that prevent you from wanting to fully invest tens of millions of dollars in him. And so, yeah, I mean, they did this to Anthony Spencer. I could certainly see them franchise tagging once or even twice DeMarcus Lawrence. He's 25 years old. He's having the season of a lifetime with an expiring contract, but he's also had 2 recent back surgeries.
And just for the record, so folks know this, next year would be about $17 million for one season. And by the way, you brought up Anthony Spencer. It worked on some levels. One season, they gave him a lot of money, with $10 or $11 million, I believe it was, and he played like 1 game. I mean, this thing can backfire on you, just as well. Now, you don't want 1 game if you sign up and get a guy for a 5-year contract. I would see if you could get him to sign a Sean Lee type deal. I thought Sean Lee had one that honored him and gave him great security, but also acknowledged that he had some injuries in his past. That was not like, oh, this guy's going to be paid like a top linebacker in the NFL. I think there might be some middle ground. Now, Lawrence's people might be sitting here thinking, no, play this out. What if he ends up close to 20 sacks? Somebody out there It's so funny that the teams that always pop into my head, the first one always is the Raiders. But somebody out there is going to pay big time for pass rushers.
I mean, a 25-year-old pass rusher coming off his greatest season ever, yeah, a lot of teams are going to be willing to invest in that should that particular player hit the market. But the Cowboys can prevent that from happening. And at the very least, they can use the threat of it as leverage to do what you were suggesting and try to get Lawrence to sign a long-term deal on more favorable terms than he could command in the open market. And they can do that now because they don't have any other player who's worth using the tag on. They're going to be paying under market on Dak Prescott for 2 more years and Zeke Elliott for 2 more years. Des Bryant's never going to get a big contract again, in my opinion, in the NFL. So I don't think there is anybody else that they need to save the tag for, and he seems perfect for this particular scenario.
By the way, I was just sitting here as you were saying that, thinking about teams over the years that have paid huge for a pass rusher. You could if free agency, you go all the way back to Reggie, the biggest one of all, Reggie White back in the day. But then when you really go over it, I guess Peppers, had a tremendous impact when
Bruce
you signed
Smith.
him. Yeah, Bruce Smith. But the world, I mean, the league is full of people that paid enormous money for free agent pass rushers. And really, I mean, Olivier Vernon is a really good player for the Giants. The Giants are sitting there at 1-6. I mean, they're horrible. I mean, and they have a pretty decent defense. I mean, it's just, you can't point to a ton of examples where somebody said, let me go get that big-time pass rusher, and that just put him in the Super Bowl or something like that. So we'll see. I mean, it's extremely important, I think, for the Cowboys to keep him. But for now, enjoy the ride. Enjoy the fact that he's putting up, enormous numbers for the Cowboys, and that David Irving, I mean, who thought you just move him right inside, basically put him over the center, and just watch him be extremely disruptive? Think about that, Ed. I mean, you watched Leon Lett do something very similar over the years.
Who's on the coaching staff.
Who's the defensive line coach for the Cowboys. Most defensive linemen, no matter what kind of speed, power they have, the thought of moving inside on most downs is like, you're taking sacks away from me. It just does. And with this guy, they've moved him inside, and he's become so much more disruptive. And I think part of that is he's just such a monster. It reminds us that any quarterback who sees pressure coming right at him in the pocket, it just freaks him out. I mean, the only quarterbacks that really, Rodgers and the guys who can move, like a Russell Wilson.
And yet Irving's had some of his best games against Rodgers and the Packers, right? He's had 4 sacks in 2 games against the Packers the last 2 years. The thing to me that makes Irving unique moving inside is he's a big, athletic, angular, long-arm type of player that's normally positioned outside. These guys inside are not used to having to handle such a great athlete like that, a tall guy, a guy who can obviously obstruct passing lanes and get in the line of sight of the quarterback, as he did when he tipped the ball yesterday and was intercepted and returned for a touchdown by Byron Jones to clinch the game. That's a great position to put him in, and maybe most teams wouldn't have seen that, but the Cowboys' experience in the 90s with Leon Lett, who's on that coaching staff, I think it certainly made it easy for them to conceive that this would be the ideal place for which David Irving, when he's available, to rush the passer.
Why don't we come up with so there was Too Tall, and then there was Big Cat with now the Cowboys have had 2 big cats going back to Rayfield Wright, the Hall of Famer, played right tackle for the Cowboys for years. Does David Irving, that you know of, have a nickname yet? I mean, Stretch might be a good one. I mean, I feel like he needs. I mean, that is a great legacy. I'm not saying he's yet to those guys' level, but right now he is extremely disruptive.
But Too Tall pretty much played end, right? I mean, he didn't really go inside. Lett was an inside player. Lett was a defensive tackle.
A straight-up defensive tackle. But I'm talking more about just, don't get too technical on me, 6'7", 6'8" lineman. I think David Irving needs a nickname. So I want to continue to explore that. And obviously right now you don't have any ideas.
I have some, but I'm not sure they'd be terribly popular with our audience.
Oh, no. I'll tell you what, let our audience reach out to us. It's at...
the pterodactyl.
Oh, that's not bad. The pterodactyl. Interesting. Give them your Twitter handle, by the way, so people, your new one.
At Ed Werder RFA.
at Ed Werder, RFA. I'm at Matt Mosley if you want to reach out to us. Now, I do want to leave time.
Should we run these by David Irving and see?
Yeah.
You know what Rod Marinelli
Let's have David on.
Rod Marinelli
has
has a lot of nicknames for his defensive players. I wonder if he's got one that we're not aware of.
The Rushmen. They're the Rushmen. Yeah.
And they actually are.
Yeah, I love these guys. I love the Irving Lawrence combo right now. We could go with sort of for instance, one of the great NBA nicknames right now is a 7'3" man named Rudy Gobert from France, and he's the Stifle Tower. That's a good one. We need something that creative for David Irving. So we'll continue to put that out there. If you got some ideas, let us know. And I want to leave time, Ed, or I want this to, you've got a lot of extensive notes over there. I want us to leave a little time to talk about Jerry's latest. Jerry was mentioned in an ESPN The Magazine story, Don Vignata and Seth Wickersham, in that one. And then there was a Mort report that comes out yesterday morning before all the games, and that's basically Jerry versus Roger Goodell.
Peter King has that too, saying a source telling Peter King that Jerry Jones is on a mission, that he is miffed about Goodell implementing the 6-game suspension on the Cowboys' best player, wrongfully so in Jerry's mind, and Jerry doesn't. He wants the players to be forced to stand for the anthem. And he's not getting his way on either one of those things, and so now he's turned vengeful, according to these sources, and wants to either oust Roger Goodell as a commissioner or deny him this lucrative new extension that seemed in the offing and put him on the thing Jerry loves most of all, the incentive plan. Jerry wants everybody to be on the incentive plan to earn their money.
Have you seen some of these contracts he's given out over the years? These are not all incentive based, but I do kind of like what he's doing. Now, since you started talking about it, and that was good to explain, let's talk about it right now. Jerry is in that one article on the ESPN, the magazine that came out. I thought Jerry kind of looked bad. It looked like the way it was represented there, and that's the one, by the way, that Bob McNair had the quote. I saw Wickersham, by the way, saying, we had a lot of nuanced reporting, and nobody's talking about that. Seth, if there's an explosive quote, it doesn't matter if you write 500 inches, that's what people are going to talk about it. The inmates are running the prison or whatever, a statement that Bob McNair, that's the way it works. And, quite honestly, you just got to be pleased when people are going that crazy over your work. So in that article, I thought Jerry came across as almost like some owners were getting jealous of him, is the way it was sort of framed, and that they were a little tired of him running everything, and that maybe they were kind of rising up against him. And I'm talking about to do with a protest and some other things that had come up. Then this latest report from both Peter King and
because
Mort,
Jerry was the only owner to issue an ultimatum to his players, as he did after the Green Bay game.
Correct.
Stand or sit out the game.
And while
which inflamed the situation all over.
I think you're right. And while Dan Snyder apparently was heard muttering, Jones has it right. Jones knows what he's doing. A lot of the owners were, and John Mara was up front. He walked out of there while Jerry kind of ducked out the side room. And in some sense, I think Jerry's more strident stand of let's make them all stand up, that was sort of voted against. So Jerry, for a brief time, looked like he had lost a bit of standing. But then this latest report, it looks like he put together a conference call of 17 owners, none of which apparently were the people on the compensation committee. Poor Arthur Blank's trying to run this contract extension, and he's got this committee. Jerry's like the ad hoc member of this committee.
And one of the reasons that Arthur Blank and the others who are on the official committee consented to allowing Jerry to try and influence them from the outside was they didn't want him as a dissenter to be creating a big disruption outside the group and threatening the group, which now he clearly seems to be doing exactly that. Now people will tell you at the ownership level that Jerry is not as influential as he thinks he is. We may be about to find out just how influential he is at the moment. Nobody seems to think that he can get the 24 votes that are necessary to deny Goodell this contract extension or to oust him from office. But if he's got 17 guys on the phone talking about the possibility, That puts him a lot closer than maybe Roger Goodell would be comfortable. It's hard for the commissioner to operate when half of the league's owners oppose him and what he's trying to do. And I think a lot of people think Jerry's being duplicitous here because, he supported Goodell, very publicly endorsed him, and justified the Tom Brady suspension. But now when his player is the guy who's being suspended, all of a sudden Jerry wants to fire the commissioner, or that's the perception.
Yes, it's exactly what it appears right now, and this is fascinating stuff from Jerry.
And it was interesting, right, when they had the players in the room last week before the official meeting of owners. There were I can't remember how many owners, but there was a significant number of owners in the group meeting directly with the players and the front office, including Roger Goodell. Jerry was not in the meeting. Jerry was not invited to that particular meeting because of the stance that he took is so unpopular with the players that they thought it would result in him being a negative influence in trying to get something productive done.
Meanwhile, in what they thought was some sort of private privilege meeting, Bob McNair makes a statement. And
if I'm Roger Goodell, the thing that concerns me the most about that story and the one before that, somebody who stands to benefit is taping these conversations among owners and passing them out. To me as a reporter, there's no way you could ever recreate to the degree that Seth and Don Van Atta have a circumstance in a meeting involving that many people, quoting people specifically and in certain orders without having been provided a tape recording of those meetings. So to me, somebody is leaking this information to the detriment of somebody, whether they're trying to undermine Roger Goodell or they're trying to promote Roger Goodell or they have some other agenda. It's pretty clear to me based on the detailed reporting, the order of it, the accuracy of it. Like Bob McNair didn't come out and say, I was misquoted. Did he? No, he didn't. Because he knew there's a recording of it. Now, I don't know who would record it, if some owner is doing it secretly, but in most of these executive session meetings, there's only one person per team allowed in when they vote.
It's interesting you say that. I would disagree on one point. I think that we've seen some reporting over the years that indicates, to me at least, Comey, you might remember Dick Comey. He records a lot of everything, and what he would do would leave these meetings with Trump and whoever else, and he would write these memos down immediately and try to have everything word for word for what happened in there. I think somebody is getting on the horn and immediately spilling their guts to everything. I have a hard time believing that somebody puts their phone out there. First of all, I don't even know if they have voice recording, some of these owners on their iPhones, and actually recording that and then giving that to the reporters.
Well, I don't know if the league, as a matter of business, records these meetings themselves for whatever purpose that might serve. But it wouldn't be hard for an owner to have his phone in his pocket and be running a recording, or somebody who accompanied the owner into a meeting like that. Like I said, I can't imagine.
The league, by the way, famously destroyed a bunch of
Spygate tapes.
Yes, they're pretty good at getting rid of things.
So this is just my theory. And I'm very respectful of the incredible job that these two former colleagues of mine have done, or ours have done, in recreating and almost putting you in the meeting. I mean, the detail, and like I said, the organization, and the fact that not one owner in either one of these stories has ever said, that's wrong, that never happened, that person was misquoted, that was never said. I mean, the accuracy of it and recreating something that complex that requires that amount of time, and you can report it with that level of confidence, that has to come directly off a tape.
Well, it is. It's gonna. We'll continue to see how this plays out. But that same reporting duo, they're the ones that had all this stuff on Iger and all the Los Angeles stuff. I mean, they put together. So somebody's giving them some. They're doing some good reporting. And
Don Van Atta did write a very favorable, lengthy profile of Jerry Jones a couple of years ago, and now we all know he drinks Johnny Walker Blue.
Yeah, and Jerry has been known to say there are only like a couple of people that he would let write a book, or I forget exactly how it goes. But now Jerry has charmed all of us at some point, so I shouldn't go into that. But I do think they struck up a pretty good relationship.
You're not saying that Jerry is responsible for
any of these stories?
These details.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, they specifically said said Jerry would not be quoted.
Yeah. I think sometimes, Ed, I'm told as a reporter you can get stuff on background. Okay, one thing I would like to do before we move on, I want to talk about the offense a little bit. Harry's razors, thank you. By the way, right now, I've kind of let mine grow out a bit. One of the reasons I do this is because it's always so nice to get my ergonomically built razor. It's orange is the one they make right now, and then I just go right over. Ed, you can see I've got a little beard going right now. It's so smooth, and it's the only razor out there that doesn't cut me. I have very sensitive skin, and that's why from time to time I've had to own styptic pencils.
It's not just your skin that's sensitive from
I'm a sensitive man.
experience.
No, you're sensitive too. But a styptic pencil. Have you ever had a styptic pencil? You know what that is?
I can't say that I do.
That's how you kind of chalk yourself up a little bit. Harry's is so confident you're going to love their blades. They'll give you a free trial shave set for free when you sign up at harrys.com/doomsday. All you do is pay for shipping. It's a great shave at a fair price, which is why over 3 million guys have switched to Harry's. It's got that weighted ergonomic razor handle, 5 precision-engineered blades with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel, and Ed, a travel blade cover.
I don't travel anymore.
Ed, that's not true. Westwood One will be sending you out soon.
I'm going to be begging American Airlines to allow me to retain my status.
I've seen you fly to London before just to maintain your status. To get your free trial set, go to harrys.com/doomsday. That's DOOMSDAY. Do it right now. That's harrys.com/doomsday. Okay, Ed, we've had a lot going in this episode, and we still have to get to Daniel Wallach, who's going to weigh in on today's hearing in federal court in New York. I believe that's Judge Falia is how we pronounce her name, and she becomes either the, fourth or fifth judge who's been involved in this. My personal favorite, Judge Amos Mazant, who went to Baylor Law School, same law school I once attended. Ed, on the offensive side of things,
once being the operative word there
for the Cowboys, briefly I attended there. It was a reminder of what this thing can look like when the offensive line is rolling and Zeke Elliott is doing his thing. And if you look at Dak Prescott, numbers don't blow you away at all. Throws for 14-22 for about 143 yards. But, Ed, this thing worked like a charm. They churned up the yardage. And I feel like right now they're treating Zeke Elliott much like they treated DeMarco Murray. Zeke, don't really care what you might be doing when you're age 27, 28. For now, we're going to get our pound of flesh, and we're going to get 33 carries out of you for 150 yards and a couple of touchdowns. You go.
It's pretty much what Jimmy Johnson did with Emmitt Smith. It's what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing with Le'Veon Bell right now. It is what the Cowboys did with DeMarco Murray. I think the thing that was impressive about Zeke Elliott was, he fumbled on his first carry and lost the football yet again to the Redskins. He's only lost 3 fumbles in his brief career, and 2 of them have been against the Redskins. But he overcame that, and I think the offensive coaches would tell you that his patience and his demeanor is really crucial to his success, and that he's a great competitor, but channels it really well if he makes a mistake, which is huge for such a young player to have such a significant role as he does. I mean, he has run for 290 yards and 5 touchdowns and scored 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games, as the Cowboys have become one of the most dominant offensive teams in the league over the past month. To me, that's why he's such an irreplaceable guy. And to me, this court decision that will be made this week that determines whether he continues to play for the rest of the season or not could provide the Cowboys their biggest victory of the year, because to me, they're a Super Bowl contender with him, and he's a potential league MVP, and without him, they're done. I mean, you're already 2 games behind the Philadelphia Eagles in the division with 2 games yet to play. You're going into the hardest part of your schedule with Kansas City starting this week, and then you've got Atlanta, and then Philly. They got to have him, and if he's not there, their defense gets exposed. And even though they have veteran running backs behind him, I don't think they can perform at the level that he does.
It's a great thing you just brought up. To your point, there's no running back in the league right now. Adrian Peterson was that guy for a few years with the Vikings. He's the first running back since Adrian Peterson, and let's not act like those teams did anything. I mean, they made the playoffs and got beat by the Eagles, as I recall, in a playoff game. Those Vikings teams, while Adrian Peterson was great, I don't think we have a lot to compare this to. He is in the MVP conversation, and every year in, year out, Tom Brady's always going to be in the top 3 or 4 for the MVP. But even in this, like you say, even over these past couple of games, just watching what he does for this team, I do think he's in the MVP conversation. Last year, we were trying to figure out, Ed, was it Dak or was it Zeke? Who was kind of the rookie of the year? Who should be the MVP? I think this year it's become very obvious that it's Zeke Elliott. Now, one more point I want to make on this offense, and I know you've got a couple of other things you want to bring to the table as well. Dez Bryant, we're back to Fox capturing all his histrionics on the sideline and holding up the two.
First of all, the histrionics weren't what the histrionics were when he was at his worst in Detroit a couple of years ago when he was disrupting a sideline meeting between Romo and Scott Linehan, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah. No,
but he was seen on the sideline gesturing with 2 fingers to to Derek Dooley, the receivers coach, to Scott Linehan, the offensive coordinator, to Jason Garrett. And I thought the most significant, and we don't know what was said, right? But
we thought it was about the targets.
Because he had 2 targets at the time. He apparently has claimed that he was going over the defensive coverages that he was seeing. Apparently he doesn't trust that these experienced coaches and the quarterback know what they're seeing, that only he knows. So what is he saying?
This
cover
means
2?
Too deep.
Too deep, cover 2.
Cover 2. I think it was probably, now he may have come up with that. I did, they handle him, the way it's interesting to watch, he was hollering. I thought Dak does a pretty good job, and they noted that on the broadcast of just kind of calming things down, and then when it's appropriate, just kind of moving on. And Garrett will kind of listen to him, but sort of be like, okay,
kind of dismisses it, right?
Yeah, move on about your business. I think it's always been, and it used to be. We used to watch T.O. on the sideline going off on the wide receivers coach or I don't know if
Michael
going
Irvin
off on him,
on Hubbard Alexander.
Hubbard. Yeah, that's sort of their position, is to whoever is the so-called sort of diva or star wide receiver to sort of get that earful so that other coaches and players don't have to hear all that. Dooley's that guy right now. So, listen, if they win in the end, I do think Dez has become more of a team player. And so, yeah, he's not going to be happy week after week with 3 catches for whatever it is, 36 yards. But
he did have a big third down catch in the game.
Correct.
In the game toward the end of the game. Clearly he's not producing at a level consistent with being a franchise player, which is what he's paid to be. He doesn't create separation like he did before he had all these injuries. He's gone, 14 regular season games without a 100-yard receiving performance. But I will say this. I think what he did in previous years on the sideline in the regard that we're talking about was disruptive and potentially damaging. I don't think what he did in this particular game from what we saw came anything close to that. And I like the fact that Dak stands up to him, right? Dak, and I think Aikman kind of alluded to this in the broadcast, but even last year, Dak made it clear to everybody that the huddle belonged to him. And anybody has any complaints about who's getting the football, just come to the quarterback. So he's made it clear that he's got full autonomy and full charge of what happens on the field from an offensive point of view. And I think if you talk to a guy like Linehan, he'd tell you that this guy's maturity level is just off the charts, that you just don't see the level of respect he's earned from veteran players in a young quarterback very often. But he's a very mature player. And I think Linehan would tell you he's the most unselfish quarterback that he's ever coached. And wise beyond his years. And
that's why we're happy that he's the official quarterback of Doomsday. And we had that one-on-one with him, which, Ed, I know you remember at the sort of in the back of a high-end jewelry store in Dallas.
David Yerman, I don't mind mentioning.
Love the Yermans. We met Mr. Yerman. I mean, the guy himself was in town. I like that guy. That was David, right? Was David that David
Yerman
himself?
Yes.
Hey, there's one note at the bottom there. I was cheating off your notes there a minute ago. Will you read that? I mean, that is a right down here.
Okay.
That has to do with Zeke Elliott, because that this player is one of the great heroes of my sports life.
Only Earl Campbell has rushed for more yards than Zeke Elliott in his first 22 NFL games. And to broaden the perspective of greatness, Elliott, in his 22nd game, has 21 rushing touchdowns. That ties Barry Sanders and Billy Sims for the third fastest to reach 20 career rushing touchdowns. So this guy's an elite player. It's why they took him with the 4th overall pick in the draft when everybody thought they needed defense. They saw him as a guy who could best affect both sides of the ball, and he certainly lived up to that. Now he just has to keep himself available to play every Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's interesting, those 3 players you mentioned, Texas, OU, and OSU. All of them come from those schools, and I would say, and I don't say this lightly, one of the things that's tough for these football players, and we saw that horrible injury to Zach Miller, but one thing you recall, the guy that a lot of us grew up worshiping, watching Earl Campbell with the Oilers, can barely walk now, and it takes an incredible toll. And then one of the other guys you just mentioned, there's a reason Barry Sanders, when the rest of us were looking around, what in the world, how could you walk away when you probably have at least 2 or 3 more seasons left? Maybe he knew something we didn't in preserving his body and his lifestyle, because quite honestly, from painkillers and alcoholism, Earl Campbell's just now putting his life back together. So anyway, don't mean to end on such a somber note, but I mean, we were reminded yesterday, as if we taped this, the reports were from Adam Schefter and Chris Mortensen, that Zach Miller was having surgery to not only save his career but perhaps save his leg. That's pretty scary.
Kind of the same thing that happened, and apparently even an even worse injury than Teddy Bridgewater suffered in a non-contact drill in practice, where he also dislocated his kneecap. And from everything I know and have read about it, he's in the care of very qualified vascular surgeons. They did an emergency operation yesterday. Apparently, he tore an artery which supplies blood to the lower leg. And so, yeah, I mean, amputation was certainly in play, and hopefully he gets the medical attention he needs and he's able to recover. Even if he can't play again, he's at least able to live a long and normal life, which you hope for all these players who expose themselves to such great injury. Like, there aren't too many jobs where you can go in completely healthy and 5 minutes later, you're on an operating table. Those jobs, I mean, they're harrowing, and that's why there is this rancor and this contention between the players and the owners and the league office. The players, even though I totally get Jerry Jones's point of view that, hey, this is my franchise, this is my business, and you're my employees, and you're going to behave on the job in the way that I demand. I totally get that, and I don't disagree with it, really. But this kind of thing reminds you of why the players, they want guaranteed contracts, and they want to be viewed as partners in this job that they have, because they do put their health, immediate and long term, on the line on every play.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well said there. And boy, speaking of well said and well spoken, my goodness, what the official attorney for the Doomsday podcast, Daniel Wallach, has been all over the Ezekiel Elliott courtroom battle, the back and forth. He's made several correct predictions. And with a hearing for 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central scheduled today in federal court in New York, it is time to bring Daniel Wallach back onto the show. The official attorney of Doomsday, and boy, there's been a lot of attorneys that have sort of battled. We're bandwagoners, and sort of whoever's getting stuff right, we generally jump on that bandwagon, and it is Daniel Wallach returning to the Doomsday podcast, Matt Mosley with Ed Werder, of course. And Daniel, as we sit here taping this on Monday afternoon, we are only a couple of hours away. 5 o'clock Eastern will be this hearing for a preliminary injunction order, and that is in front of Judge Fela there in New York. Now, You've had a lot of good stuff on Twitter. Basically, as we get closer, by the time we put this out here in a couple of hours, it'll be right about time for the hearing. What are you expecting, and what do you think Judge Fela will be sort of considering and using of all the rulings from the past as she gets ready to make a decision?
Okay, well, first off, Matt and Ed, thank you for the promotion. And given that so many attorneys are vying to be on the Doomsday podcast, I won't consider my position to be one that's very stable. The ground is always unsettled, and you're only as good as your last correct prediction. But I would expect to be more of the same from Judge Fela today, because she's going to look at the exact same questions that Judge Crowdy considered a week and a half ago. The same standard applies to a preliminary injunction that governs a temporary restraining order. So using the prior three opinions as sort of a roadmap, she'll have to consider probably the two most important inquiries are the irreparable harm that Elliott faces relative to the harm that the NFL would face if they weren't able to enforce the suspension. And that's called the balancing of the harms. And if Judge Fela comes out the same way on the balancing of the harms that the other three judges did, which is that Elliott faces decidedly more harm from serving a suspension than the NFL would, but from having to delay the suspension for 1 year, if that comes out in Elliott's favor, and it absolutely has to, there's no other way to look at it, then on the likelihood of success portion of the preliminary injunction ruling, Elliott wouldn't even have to show he's likely to succeed, only that he has raised a serious question going to the merits of the case, which raises a quote-unquote fair ground for litigation. That is an important, very important step down in the threshold that Elliott needs to sustain here today. So because he faces much more harm than the NFL, he doesn't have to go all the way and show that he's likely or virtually certain to win. And I think that's going to be outcome dispositive today. And Judge Fela should rule in a manner very consistent with her colleague, Judge Crowdy, who's a very well-respected senior judge in the Southern District of New York. When
this ruling is made, do you expect the outcome, regardless of the decision, to determine once and for all whether Zeke Elliott plays the rest of this season for the Cowboys and avoids a 6-game suspension?
Absolutely, and here's why. In Texas, you might recall that the NFL went to the Fifth Circuit right after the preliminary injunction ruling from Judge Amos Mazant and asked the Fifth Circuit for a stay of that injunction. But the reason the NFL was able to make that make that motion was they had serious questions about the subject matter jurisdiction of the Texas court. The jurisdictional issues don't exist in the Southern District of New York. This is where the NFL believes the case should be filed. And I don't know if the NFL, and I'm very skeptical that the NFL has a shot at getting a stay of the injunction because of the lack of irreparable harm to the league and certainly a ton of it to Elliott. And that's the very reason the NFL didn't seek a stay of the ruling in the Deflategate case and went to the full merits of the appeal. So I believe that if Judge Fela enters a preliminary injunction in favor of Elliott and the NFLPA, that will solidify Elliott's status for the balance of the season. The only thing that could possibly change it would be if the NFL asked for and received an emergency stay from the Second Circuit. And I don't think they're even going to ask for one, given the irreparable harm issue which stands in the way.
After the game against the Redskins, in which he had 150 yards rushing for the Cowboys yesterday, Zeke Elliott did not get on the plane and fly home. He instead traveled to New York to be present at this hearing today. What's the significance of that, given that he's trying to argue that this is potentially a harmful situation to him, that that's the first point he has to meet or standard he has to meet?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a smart move for the client to be present during an important court proceeding. If Elliott and the Players Association are going to claim irreparable harm, you want to be able to put a face on that argument, and the optic of Elliott being present, whereas Roger Goodell is not present, I don't think it makes a difference in the outcome, but it is certainly symbolic, and it makes a very strong presentation to the court that if your client is arguing something so severe as that the harm would be irreparable, I think it would be advisable for the client to attend the court proceeding, particularly since it's a day off. It's a no-brainer. And just as Brady attended some of the earlier Deflategate proceedings, although he did it under a court order, I think it's very smart tactical strategy to have your client sitting in court. I mean, every time I argue cases, appeals, or any important extraordinary motions, the clients want to be in the courtroom. I don't have to drag them. They're ordinarily there because they have an interest in the outcome. And if Elliott has an interest in this outcome, and of course he does, and he's claiming irreparable damage and harm to his reputation and to his ability to achieve certain goals, he better be in court. And I think it's a smart and the only move for Elliott.
And one last thing I had for you, when you see Jerry Jones come out and basically say, and he was very strident in saying that nothing has, that Zeke has done nothing wrong here. And he's sort of said this all along.
By any standard, Jerry said. Yeah. He's done nothing wrong. Has in no way, by any standard in this country, done anything wrong. He's done nothing wrong.
Is that, when as an attorney and someone who, when you hear that and knowing all the testimony or the police records and some of the stuff that's already out there that we've all read about Zeke, is this helping Zeke's cause in any way? Are you surprised that Jerry would come this strong, or is it just Jerry's feeling a win coming on and this is almost sort of Jerry's touchdown dance?
Well, using an NFL draft analogy, in legal circles and in the judge's viewpoint, Jerry Jones would be the equivalent of Mr. Irrelevant. Okay, his opinion on the guilt or innocence of his employee has no sway with the court, has no factor or credence in the outcome of the case. This case and the lawsuit challenging the arbitration award was predicated not on the guilt or innocence of the player, but it highlighted shortcomings in the procedures afforded to Elliott during the arbitration proceeding. It's a fundamental fairness argument, not one that is designed to vindicate him on the merits. This has never been about the merits. The challenge is focused entirely on whether he was deprived of fundamental fairness through the exclusion of certain evidence and testimony. It's a different issue, and it's an entirely different consideration. So what Jerry Jones has said about his player and that there's no evidence, it doesn't matter. It doesn't add weight or take away any weight. It's a non-factor.
What's your view on the likelihood of a settlement between the NFL and Elliott to put an end to all of this one way or the other? Do you see that as favorable to both sides at some point, or do you?
I did. For a while I did, because I thought that there was a middle ground. Maybe a 2-game or 3-game suspension. But now that we're this deep into the NFL season with, only, I think there are 9 games remaining, the Cowboys are going to be in a dogfight for both the playoffs and for playoff positioning. I don't think there are games to give here. And if Elliott would probably want to have this if he were to take a reduced suspension, I think he probably and the team would want to look at next year. And the NFL certainly wouldn't want to get its pound of flesh a year from now. The NFL wants to have the suspension served right now. And they weren't reasonable in dealing with Brady and the Players Association during the Deflategate. If you recall, Judge Richard Berman ordered the parties to appear before a mediator to try to resolve the matter amicably. And under a court order, they couldn't reach a settlement. So without a court order mandating this kind of mediation, I don't see the league and the Players Association striking a deal, particularly since all that bad case law is already out there from Judge Mazant, Judge Crotty, and the dissenting opinion from Judge Graves. You can't unscramble the egg. If there was a way that Elliott could serve time, a reduced suspension, well, the NFL would certainly want to have those prior orders eliminated or vacated. And I think if you settle now, those opinions remain there for use in future cases potentially. So that's why I think it's too late for a deal.
Do you think, last thing, Daniel, that we could get that sketch artist who did Tom Brady to do Zeke Elliott? I feel like that's the only thing we're missing right now.
Yeah, Jane, the immortal Jane Rosenthal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean that was Deflategate, legendary stuff. What a horrible sketch that was.
We have Chris Morris. We'll loan out Chris Morris if the NFL needs a sketch of the courtroom.
We should have him for this podcast today do a sketch, like a sketch artist rendering of Zeke.
Well, if we paid him any more than we're paying our current guest, we probably could impose upon him. But since we're not, we'd have to ask it as a favor.
The funny thing is, we're going to have the same courtroom sketch artist because she worked in the federal courthouse in New York for the Southern District of New York. And they're not just sketch artists assigned to a particular judge. They are the sketch artists that work out of the court, and she's in the pool of sketch artists. So, this will be her redemption.
Or not. or it'll be confirmation of that's the kind of artist she is.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for everything you do for us, and I know you'll be all over this afternoon. Now, give us just a quick timetable. If you were to guess on when we'll have a ruling, would it be within 24 hours, 48 hours? What's your best guess on that?
By the end of the day, Tuesday. Remember, Judge Crotty promised the parties that he would issue his ruling on the TRO by the close of business the same day. And that was also a 2 p.m. It was a middle of the day hearing, and he got an order out 8:30 p.m. I think given the fact that we're dealing with a 5 p.m. Eastern time preliminary injunction hearing, which will go into a little bit more time and detail than the TRO hearing did, I think we're looking at some point during the day on Tuesday. But it would not be out of the realm of possibility for Judge Fela to burn the midnight oil and issue a ruling late tonight. But I don't see any major advantage for her to provide one Monday at midnight when she could take the night, make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and get it to be airtight, because this is going to be appealed. If she enters a ruling in favor of Elliott, the NFL will take an appeal to the Second Circuit. So I think from her vantage point, it's more prudent to get the ruling correct than to rush it out artificially, because if she denies the preliminary injunction, there's no imperative for her to do so Tuesday at 4 p.m., whatever the NFL rules require. Whenever she issues that ruling, if it does go against Elliott, the league would be free to suspend him, even if it came Thursday or Friday. But I think given past precedent of how quickly the courts in this case have issued rulings, I think we're looking at 1 to 2 days max.
All right. If this thing gets to the Second Circuit, by the way, I'm going to come. We're going to meet. You and I will meet at the Second Circuit, and I'm going to take you to dinner. Okay?
Are you paying?
We'll talk about that
That's
later.
A great question to ask, even when he does extend the invitation. He did make it seem like you should expect that he was going to cover the check, but you're smart to ask.
It's on Doomsday. It is on Doomsday.
Yeah, could McCann come too?
Of course.
If he gets something right.
I'll buy McCann's portion of the meal, even though apparently I'm not invited. But you guys go. You guys all have a good time.
Well, I'll be there, my friends, but it will likely be an argument in the winter. There's very little chance the Second Circuit will tee this up for oral argument this season. I mean, even if it's expedited, we're probably looking at appeal that will be briefed in the early part of 2018, and you'll likely see an oral argument in the March-April time period, just like the Brady case.
All right.
I may be in Palm Desert.
And you're down for lunch. Count me in.
Yeah. I think it was actually dinner if you want to.
Yeah.
You want to really,
dinner. Yes, dinner. Lunch would be too fast. We're going to be in court.
Too inexpensive.
You're on. You can pick any place.
Thanks very much, Daniel. We appreciate it.
And that was the official attorney of the Doomsday podcast. His name's Daniel Wallach. You can read his work online, on Twitter. So much fun. Thank you, Daniel.
At Wallach Legal.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Happy always to be the official Doomsday sports law attorney. I will honor that title with my very best. And thanks for the designation. I'll try to keep up the good work
Treasure
until I'm wrong.
All right.
And that has been another Doomsday podcast.
Shining, stockings have been hung. You're praying for your daughter, lighting candles for your son. They're living in the city now. You don't not be like the ones before. And the streets are all but empty, the bars have all shut down, and it's hard to find a friend inside this godforsaken town. That emptiness, it feels from your head down to your toes. I'm sorry, baby, that's just the way it goes. Once you were a young girl with lovers by the score, money by the handful, you never wanted more. But they tend to leave you as time has its way, and they leave behind little mouths to feed and raise. And the days go by so slowly when it used to go so fast. Whiskey does not taste as good when you only pour one glass.
It's one thing falling in love with a house, picturing yourself moving in and calling it home, and quite another navigating the world of price negotiating, mortgage lenders, and finding the budget that works best for you. An agent who's a Realtor can make understanding that world easier. Realtors have the expertise, access to proprietary data, and tools to help you get from imagining living somewhere to actually doing it. That's the kind of help we can provide. Because that's who we are. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
The living room is where you make life's most beautiful memories. But your sofa shouldn't be the one remembering them. The new life-resistant, high-performance furniture collection from Ashley is designed to withstand all the spills, slip-ups, and muddy paws that come with the best parts of life. Ashley high-performance sofas and recliners are soft, on-trend, and easy to clean. Shop the high-performance furniture in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.